the prices are too low and they actually have no benefit, which is actually the logic of selling goods.
Indeed they do it because
yes,
they have
maybe
political,
it is the case,
but
they're just
objectives, like in Chile.
And maybe that's an argument I can give you. But what about Pedeval? What about all the foods? There were tons of foods that actually got rotten. And Pedeval, it is actually the
PDVSA. But what's your opinion on the ones that were headed?
It is actually the part of PDVSA that it is in charge of just putting those goods in the market, and they got rotten. They got rotten in the port. Tons of goods. So it is not a small business or whatever that doesn't want to
We should
sell.
get back to the basics. What is exactly at stake? The main point is that the opposition has never accepted the legitimacy of the victory of Hugo Chavez, of Chavez and Maduro winning 17 out of 18 elections. You never accepted that. At the beginning, the opposition even was opposed to the constitution.
But CASSEN, you heard our correspondent Girish Gupta say that most of the people on the streets don't recognize themselves in those opposition leaders.
But the problem of the opposition leaders is that they are competing.
But they were saying the reason they're out in the street
they are competing
was
with
because
each other
of food shortages and because of crime.
No, but it's quite clear that there are shortages. The causes are one, there is a certain amount of disorder. There is, as Raquel said, hoarding of hiding food, etc., to provoke a political crisis. That's absolutely true. But
the government is also hiding things because Pedeval, it's a government agency in charge of putting those goods, but tons of food got rotten when people were queuing in line.
But what is the problem? We agree there are problems. The problem is how do you address these problems? Do you address them in a democratic way or in a quasi-fascist way? When Leopoldo López says that the protest must be pacific, peaceful, in actual fact, he is asking people to take to the streets. And there is a competition between Capriles and Leopoldo López as to determine who will be the leader. There is a real position between the two.
Was saying that most people aren't listening to either of them.
Which is good news, and maybe there will be room for peace. Maybe the peace offering that Maduro did will find some.
There's a distorted view of what is the root of the economic problems, and that is not exactly the only problem in Venezuela, because there are the political problems and the economic problems. What is the root? There has been an exchange rate that was set by the government that has allowed basically a lot of corruption coming from the government because they are in control of the exchange rate. They have destroyed production in Venezuela. We were a country that produced cattle, that had milk, that had a field that was producing. And
you're forgetting something. Is that the purchasing power,
property and land, and today
exactly
for instance,
to organize agriculture because before in the old regime it was only petroleum.
The result has been that 90% of the food today is imported. Come on, that is the truth.
No,
I mean, 90% of food is imported.
Too much is imported.
We have 60% inflation. I mean, it's a government that has been there for 15 years.
There has been a growing demand because of the redistribution of wealth, and supply hasn't been able to follow the demand.
It may have been a right discourse for the 1970s. It has nothing to do with what has happened
right
today.
Wing and you disagree with left-wing politics. That has to be settled by democratic means. I'm sorry.
How do you explain that? How do you explain the victories, the constant victories of Chavism? How do you explain that the majority of the population, that is the poor, supports the government as it supported the previous government?
Winning elections one day, because actually you're talking that in Venezuela there is a democracy, right? Even if Human Rights Watch just said a couple of days ago that in Venezuela there's been like an authoritarian turn. So that is...
Human Rights Watch has said that since day one regarding Chavez.
Well, actually not. They have made a statement on last actions of the government. Second, I want to say, well, okay, we are establishing that in Venezuela we have a democracy. Then, if we're establishing that, isn't it just in a democracy that we can question what the government is doing that is not good?
You can.
So can we go to the street and protest?
It's a
but we're
constitutional
being
right.
put behind
No,
bars
what
if
you
we
cannot
do
do,
so.
what you cannot do is set public buildings on fire, destroying public property. That you cannot do. In France, you can't do this either.
Were killed, where their heads were chopped because
one
general said that you had to put children in the street to cut their heads.
We're not promoting barricades.
Okay, so just let's all start by condemning the violence.
It's a student protest.
And shift to democratic discussion.
But there's one
It
thing.
is democratic discussion.
It is a student
You have just seen that
protest
Capriles has
became-
refused the public offering
Can I
of peace
speak 1 second?
from Maduro.
Please, just 1 minute.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that the student protest that was a pacific and, massive student protest became now a social protest. And we have to say that, when you start with violence, because there were students that were killed after the march had finished, and there's a lot of footage on that, they were killed on the back, by the police,
by the same weapon that killed the Chavismo.
and by people who have masks.
We should be clear.
All right.
Two people were killed by the same gun. The Chavismo and
I just want to bring in Girish Gupta. I want to bring in Girish Gupta on this. Girish, just to remind folks who don't know Venezuela very well, it's all happening in the nation which, according to OPEC, sits on the world's largest oil reserves. Mm-hmm. So what is the explanation that people are giving you as to why there are shortages on things like sugar and powdered milk and toilet paper?
No, that's not the case. I was in Venezuela not so long ago.
Girish Gupta.
So this is it. This is the big opposition criticism. This country, according to OPEC, and itself does have the world's largest oil reserves. So what's gone wrong? Why are there shortages? Why is the money worth less and less every single day? And essentially, it's clearly not being run in the best way for an economy. Now, you talk earlier about hoarding and so on. Well, what do you expect? That's what the natural instinct for people to do is to make as much money or profit at least as much as possible. That is capitalism at the end of the day, and that's what we see. If people can make a fast buck, they do. If people need dollars, they will get them on the black market, and that's why you have such disparity between differential between the official rate. The currency against the US dollar and the black market rates, 4 times difference. That's phenomenal difference. It makes those with dollars or any hard currency here or euros incredibly rich. They can live like kings, and it makes those who earn in local currency, who don't have access to hard currency, incredibly poor and poorer every single day. And this is down to currency controls. Venezuelans cannot get dollars in the same way euros, in the same way you can change them in Paris, and there's price controls. There's all of these controls which frankly don't seem to be working. That's what's causing these shortages. People cannot import because they cannot get the dollars, and that's why essentially we're having these problems. And I don't think you can necessarily blame people for hoarding or for making a fast buck. That's how economies work.
Raquel, GARRIDO.
Well, the first thing about petrodollars is that the people like Leopoldo Lopez effectively were at the core of the old petro regime. They were at the core of PDVSA, which was the petroleum company. And those are the people who most lost when money actually started being redistributed after Chavez came into power. So these people were filthy rich.
Right, but
now petrodollars are being redistributed.
Has the system run out of steam when you have a situation where currency controls are no longer working, as the correspondent was saying?
One of the reasons they're not working is because the money that is the dollars that are bought to import actually go to goods that then are hidden, which is a problem. But then there's, I recognize that there is a legitimate discussion on whether you should have such ways of having a currency control. I mean, that's a legitimate discussion that even is ongoing inside of the government. I mean, it's and everywhere. It's fine. That is a fine and legitimate discussion. But let's not, please. We're not children. I mean, Leopoldo Lopez, his problem isn't about currency. The folk, the poor folk, they don't want to buy dollars. That's not their problem. I mean, poor people in the world don't get up in the morning and say, how can I buy dollars? That's not a popular problem. But I mean, you do have a process of destabilization of this government, which is at the end of the day undemocratic, and this government should be supported, and it's right. And the peace offering it's making to the opposition, and all I can hope for is that opposition will come back into democracy. And I mean, Leopoldo Lopez actually.
Right, a reaction for you, Raquel, from one of our viewers.
I mean, I just want to say this, François. Leopoldo Lopez would be in jail in France. He participated in the coup. A reaction from one of our viewers. He dissolved the Congress.
People are dying, being robbed, being tortured, being raped in Venezuela.
Yeah, well, also in France and in lots of other countries.
This is absolutely ridiculous.
I'm sorry, 25,000 people killed last year in France. And it's
nobody's
more
being
than
raped
a
or
war, than countries that are
in Venezuela.
But you speak about dialogue, and I would like to say something. It's very interesting for me to see. It's like if you. People in Ukraine, they are being killed, and the government might be saying, well, let's dialogue. Well, first you have to stop killing people, and then you might,
Who is killing people? This is pure imagination.
You acknowledge that the kid that was killed by the same weapon as a policeman. So
yes.
Doesn't that strike you as weird? Doesn't that strike you as the fact that maybe the people that was holding the gun isn't from the government? Don't you think that?
Sorry, the policeman was
no. Obviously, you don't want to think that. Okay, well, that's fine.
Actually, there are several videos that are on the social media that are in Twitter.
What would be the advantage for the government to have people to have policemen kill protesters?
I'm sorry, but it is happening.
No,
the reason, of course, it is. There are videos that actually demonstrate it, and there are people hiding in their homes, and they're scared, and with their cell phones in very precarious way.
Let me bring in Girish Gupta on this. Girish, on Monday. There was an interview granted to a radio station by what was a close ally of the late president, Hugo Chavez, who said that perhaps the crackdown had gone too far. Is there the feeling that crackdown has gone too far, even among other Chavistas, as they're called?
Now, we have had, I mentioned Thatcher earlier, which is the Western state where all of this started. Now, that's seen the most violence, I said. Now, the governor of Thatcher is a Chavista. He's on that ticket, and he came out and said, no, what, this has gone too far. The government response has not been right. Leopoldo Lopez should not be in jail. Now, to be honest, he is rare, I think, among Chavistas. It's not often that these guys come out. It's not like in the US or Europe where I think, there is dissent within parties, and that's seen as healthy. It's very rare to see that here. So there is a bit of that, but I wouldn't say it's systemic or telling of the entire government. But yeah, it is starting to be said, and this is dangerous for Nicolas Maduro. Nicolas Maduro is not Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez had this great charisma that people could hold on to, and he was useful for in government to stay there. Nicolas Maduro is less powerful, and he does have enemies with his own party. And
would you say 10 months on, how is it? Are you surprised by the events, the way events have unfolded?
To be honest, I think we expected something. We knew that the economy was struggling. We knew that, I say we being journalists, analysts, people who watch Venezuela, people who live in Venezuela, I think people did expect something because the economy was really struggling. The shortages were bad last year. They're worse now. Inflation was bad last year. It's worse now. Crime last year. It's worse now. And coupled with those things, you don't have Hugo Chavez. You don't have this great unifying, entertaining orator to sort of soak it all up and say that everything's okay. So yeah, I think this was sort of expected. No one knew exactly how it manifested itself, but people expected something.
Bernard CASSEN, you've met Hugo Chavez. Do you share sort of what's being said there by our correspondent, that we knew that Chavez would be a tough act to follow?
That Chavez would be a tough act to follow. Of course, yes. Chavez is unique, I would say. There are few people like him in a generation or even a century. But Maduro has, of course, replaced Chavez with he was very reluctant because he had always considered Chavez as his political master. But in 10 months, he has, I think, taken his stand. He's in control. He's calm and quiet. He has a clear vision of things. I think that he's a good leader. He's the best possible leader for Venezuela at the moment. But of course, he's not Chavez. But I think that there has been too much propaganda on Venezuela at the moment. Of course, what is taking place at the moment is serious, but not that serious, because the opposition, there is an opposition, a strong opposition, has no particular claim to put forward. It's quite okay to protest against insecurity, against inflation, against the shortage. Okay, but that doesn't make a program, a government program.
All right, let me ask Paula Osorio about that. I know that you'll disagree about whether or not Nicolas Maduro is a good leader, but do you take the point that the problem in Venezuela is also with the opposition, which hasn't gelled so far?
Well, actually, I wanted to get into another point, because there's something that it is into my heart, and I must say it, and it is that Maduro is not Chavez. And we saw that in the last elections. And the thing is that today, when we have people that have nothing just to eat, and they have claims, and they are valuable claims, I think in France, we would have had a lot of more people in the streets fighting for that. And that is just outrageous, that you just don't respect... that you just don't respect what is happening right now in Venezuela. We have 15 students that are dead. And especially we have almost 600 that are behind bars. So that's unbearable. So I think things are going out of control. And The Guardian, actually, in the last article they actually published on Sunday, they said the pre-revolution is over. And I think the pre-revolution is over. It is the ugly revolution that is happening right now.
And plus, Maduro, we have to remember, it's a leader that supports Bashar Assad, that has been, there has been against the Ukrainians, that has been supporting countries like North Korea and Belarusia. So, you know, it really strikes me that... And
you think that's the reason why people are in the streets in Caracas?
No, I'm saying that is something that strikes me, that...
And do you
but
support...
that you have like a blind, you know, automatic solidarity with a government that has been proving, you know, along the way that it's becoming more and more authoritarian, more and more totalitarian.
All of those things you said was the case before Maduro. The international relations of Venezuela that are linked to their petroleum status in the OPEC were there before.
I'm talking about
nothing has changed on that side.
How countries, you know, that are not understanding what's happening in Venezuela, and people like you in the left that have an automatic solidarity with a government that has been proven.
Well, you have an automatic.
Do you have automatic solidarity with Saudi Arabia, for example?
You know,
or Jordania,
or
Qatar.
Well, actually, I think there's something that we hadn't say that it is actually very important. It is that Bashar al-Assad actually sent a word to Maduro and said that actually he was very okay, and he congratulated on the way he's been handling the protests on the last time. And we must remember these protests are, of course, the claims of the students, but there are also nurses, there are also doctors, there are also teachers, and especially doctors are on the streets because they cannot even cure or treat their patients. People with cancer are on the streets
Chavez,
because...
Never had there been so many doctors in poor neighborhoods. You had the plan
Yes, but if we have doctors, but if we didn't have medicine...
We're caught by the clock. Raquel Garrido, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there.
Well, I wanted to say...
Bernard CASSEN, I want to thank you as well. I also want to thank Natalia, BRANDLER, and as well to Paula Osorio for being with us. Thank you for joining us here for the France 24 debate. We didn't even get a chance.
The Observer's Direct.
Cambodia makes expensive jeans and t-shirts for sale in the richest countries of the world. But its textile workers have to subsist on pitiful wages. there are signs they've had enough. We joined our observer, Moses, in the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh, where the textile workers are threatening revolt.
The Observer's Direct, on France 24 and France24.com.